What's up everybody, Jason from Jason's Exotic Reptiles back at you with another video. You want to make the most naturalistic enclosure possible and you're considering a night drop. Well, in this video we're going to go through the pros, cons, what I recommend, what I don't, and if you are going to use a night drop, what you should do. Per the usual, let's show off this guy before we dive into the video. This is a Leopard Arabesque, really beautiful animal. He wants to move right now, but let's try to get him still for the camera. I got him a couple years ago. I've been raising him up. I saw him and I just said I have to have him. I like Leopard, I like Arabesque, and Leopard Arabesque in one animal is pretty cool. So let's show him off. His eyes are super black and just got the awesome Arabesque pattern with this leopard coloring. Just really cool. Look at the belly on him. Awesome guy. Let's dive into night drop or not. Before we get into why I don't recommend a night drop, let's talk about what a night drop is. A night drop is essentially when at night you either reduce your thermostat temperatures to reduce your cage temperatures overall, or turn your heating element off completely, reducing it down to room temperature. The concept of a night drop is nothing new. It's been around for a very long time, and it usually kind of gets sparked when people start reading care articles, they start looking into natural conditions for these animals, or they start getting their new thermostat and has this option. They want to get fancy with it. They want to start doing a night drop because their thermostat lets them. This generally sends this person down a rabbit hole of thinking a night drop is necessary and we should do it. And I don't think there's anything wrong with a night drop. It's certainly required for some species, but for most species that we keep in captivity, a night drop is not required. So why I don't recommend it is because it kind of overcomplicates a really simple process. Many of these animals come from tropical or subtropical areas, and they really don't experience that much of a night drop. So it's not necessary, and a lot of the times it overcomplicates your thermostats. It overcomplicates your temperatures, and you're spending a lot of time messing around with the cage, messing around with the thermostat, trying to get the temperatures right. And again, it's not necessary, it's not required. Just because it happens in nature doesn't mean that it's perfect. If we were outside in nature, we would need to take shelter at night because it gets cold. These animals are not outside in nature. They're not taking shelter. They're not going in. A lot of these are nocturnal. They're hunting at night because they have to, and that's kind of how they're programmed and wired, but it's not because it's prime condition for these animals. They want to be at a certain temperature. They want to have the right humidity, and they want to have these care requirements. Just because it happens in nature doesn't mean they need it in captivity. So that's generally why I don't recommend a night drop. If you are going to do it, we're going to talk about how to do it properly now. Why people do it kind of makes sense, is it aligns with nature, and it makes sense of, well, at night the sun goes down, the temperatures drop, and I want to do a night drop. I want to create natural in my artificial enclosures. Some people say that I want to turn off the electricity at night, or I want to reduce the electricity at night because it reduces my bills, and that also makes sense. But that's not what's best for the animal in all cases. I personally don't recommend a night drop for a couple reasons. The first reason is that it overcomplicates a very simple process. These animals generally don't need a night drop. It doesn't provide them a lot of benefit, and just because the temperatures go down at night doesn't necessarily mean that they need it to go down at night. That's just what happens in nature. And nature isn't always the best thing for the animals. Nature can be harsh, and nature puts animals in conditions that really makes them struggle at times. So just because it happens doesn't mean we should do it, and it overcomplicates the process. Another reason I don't recommend a night drop, especially with these tropical, subtropical species like Burmese pythons, boas, even different types of colubrids, is it can cause regurgitation of their food. So when you drop the temperature, the animals need a certain temperature so that they can digest their food properly. These are cold-blooded animals. They don't generate heat like we do. If their temperature drops in their environment too low, it can cause them to have trouble digesting. They can't digest it fast enough, and they start to regurgitate their food. So usually as you drop the temperature, you need to make sure you adjust your feeding to that. But if you go too low, they can't digest it all, and they're going to regurgitate, which lastly, it can lead to health issues. Is a lot of people will cut their temperatures off at night. This, over a short duration, doesn't affect the animals generally. But over a longer duration, if you continue to drop your temperatures at night, it can lead to different issues like respiratory infections and regurgitation, as we just covered. but respiratory infections, different types of pneumonia, because they're exposed to periods of time where they have no body heat and they have no ability to keep their body warm. So this is not ideal for these animals for these prolonged periods of a night drop. When you drop the temperature, you have to realize that a lot of these animals they just don't need the night drop. There's no reason for it. And again, I can't emphasize enough, it's a really simple process to keep reptiles in captivity. But as you start implementing these night drops, you start overcomplicating things. You add factors of health and illness that you wouldn't need to have if you just kept the temperature constant. But we are going to talk about, if you do want to do it, how to do it properly. If you are going to do a night drop, I encourage you to really look deeply into the species. Some species do fine with the night drop and others just really don't do well with this night drop. So I'd encourage you to really look into what the species is naturally like in its natural habitat and only do a small night drop. So if the animal wants a hot spot of 88 degrees or 90 degrees, don't cut that heat source off. Maybe you can lower it to low 80s and you can do that night drop. But again, does it really provide benefit to these animals, or is it just something cool for you to play with on the thermostat? If so, go buy something, go get a new app on your phone and play with the app on your phone. Don't focus on messing around with your animal's health because you want to play with the cool thermostat you just bought. Leading into that species comment again, some species in subtropical and hibernating species do like the night drop. They actually need it. Some species need the hibernation if you want to make them breed. These same species do not need the night drop or hibernation if you don't want them to breed. So align it with your goals. Are you doing this because it's for breeding, or are you doing it because, as I mentioned, you got a cool thermostat and you want to mess with the feature? But a lot of the times it's not, it kind of goes a little bit into the advanced nature of it. So when people do night drops for these species or start bringing them into hibernation, you have to adjust your food to that. Usually if you're burmating them or hibernating them, you don't feed them as often. Sometimes you don't feed them at all because their digestive system isn't working. So you need to do this and consider the species you have and adjust how you're feeding and other factors of your keeping in order to make sure that your night drop is actually beneficial and not harmful. So certain species that I have, I need to burmate them in the wintertime. I actually cut their heat source off and I put them in a whole different room because my room is constant 78 degrees. If my room was constant 70 degrees, I could not cut my heat off at night at all. But technically, because my room is constant 78 degrees, I could cut off all my heat and that would do a night drop for everything. But I don't find it beneficial. My cages are large enough where they have access to a 78 degree hotspot and they also have access to this 88, 90 degree constant. They can pick what's best for them. I don't pick it for them. And that's what a night drop does. It picks it for them. But some species need that if you're going to bring them into a breeding program. Another component, if you are going to do a night drop, is to make sure they always have access to that area that's 76 to 78 degrees. That's kind of that sweet spot where they start having issues with regurgitation. So again, you have to adjust your feeding. I could successfully do a night drop and just cut off all my heat altogether because my room is that right temperature. But if I start doing that, my whole room may drop and that may cause other problems. So if your room is average room temperature, let's just say 70 to 72 degrees, and you cut off your heat, then you're going to struggle with keeping that animal healthy. So you need to always make sure if you do the night drop, most species in captivity, they need that 76 to 78 degree minimum hot spot to get to. So you can reduce your heat, but don't go below that area unless you really know that species and you're doing it for a purpose such as breeding. I can't emphasize enough, it's very, very species dependent. And most things that we have, boas, Burmese pythons, and most colubrids, they do not benefit from a night drop and they do not need a night drop. But if you're going to do it, you have to know what you're doing with the animal. Do not be a newbie or a novice keeper and just try to implement this night drop and do these extreme things that you may see people recommending on Facebook without fully adjusting all factors. And for that reason, that is why I conclude that you should not do a night drop if you're a hobby keeper and you just have zero interest in breeding, or especially if you're a newer keeper and you're keeping the boa constrictor, ball pythons, Burmese pythons. The most common animals you can get in captivity usually have zero benefit from a night drop, and if anything, it's just going to cause you a lot of problems. With that said, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, let me know in the comments. Do you like what I said? Do you disagree with what I said? Have you used a night drop in the past, and do you still use one now? I really want to hear from you so I can learn from you the same way you learn from me. If you're looking for a community of reptile keepers and breeders, make sure to check out my Patreon, patreon.com/JasonExoticReptiles. If you're looking to buy some animals or you want to check out some cool stuff, check out my website, jasonexoticreptiles.com. Till next video, let's keep it moving.